is important today, and it's listening to our panel speakers. I'm very happy to introduce Talia, and she will introduce herself better. But Talia has over 10 years experience in the settlement sector. Her big passion is to find ways in which government, civil society, and not-for-profit can collaborate, and private sectors can work together to support the secondary migration of refugees from metropolitan areas to regional and rural towns. So today we're going to hear the insights she gained from traveling around the world to regional and rural communities to find out what makes a regional center a welcome center for refugees and newcomers. Thank you so much, Talia, for being with us, and to you now.
Thank you, Marcella, for that introduction. I'm just going to share my PowerPoint while we get started. Great, so I'd like to thank you for inviting me to be part of today's event and the Blue Mountains Refugee Support Group. I've known about the work of and the amazing things that have been happening in the Blue Mountains for some time. Before working at Multicultural New South Wales, which is where I work now, I worked with people seeking asylum in Sydney for about 4 years, and I remember working really closely with a number of volunteers that were supporting some of my clients at that time, and just how incredible the sense of welcome and the wraparound support that volunteers in the Blue Mountains were providing to quite vulnerable people. So I'm really happy to be part of today's event. And I too would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we're all meeting on today. I'm joining you from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some international insights from a Churchill Fellowship trip that I did last year around the world, and that trip was really building on some of the work I've been doing within the New South Wales government over the past few years, supporting a number of smaller regional and rural communities across the state who, around the time of the crisis in Syria and Iraq, when there was a lot of media attention, put their hands up and thought, what can we do locally to try and help out this global situation, and approached us as a state government agency for support around how they could try to attract refugees to their town. So being a state government agency at the time, we weren't able to necessarily influence a number of towns becoming new primary settlement locations. So our focus really became on supporting those towns to look at how they could affect change from the community, from the ground up, in terms of initiating and developing a strategy to try and attract people who are already in the country and living in big cities like Sydney that might be interested to relocate to a smaller community. So we've done a lot of work with a number of communities across the state, but it really got me thinking at the time when I was working with these communities that there must be some interesting examples around the world that we can learn from to shape our approach here. And that's what spurred me on to apply for the Churchill Fellowship. And ultimately, I was very privileged to go to Canada, the US, Germany, Norway and Sweden, and visit a whole bunch of places, rural and regional centres of different sizes with very different starting points and different local contexts to learn from their experiences. So in each of the places I went to, I met with a whole range of stakeholders. I really wanted to get a good cross-section of understanding from the perspective of local government, from the perspective of local business, from the perspective of volunteers, and of course from the perspective of newcomers themselves in those communities, what their experiences had been like and what had worked well, what some of their challenges had been. And my intention was to make the research really practical, so to look out for those strategies and ideas that I could gather and then bring back and share with towns and communities here who are interested in the same thing, which is why I always really appreciate the opportunity speak at these kinds of events because I felt so inspired while I was away and heard so many amazing things that it's such a great opportunity for me to share and really showcase some of the incredible things that are happening around the world, but sometimes go unnoticed because they're perhaps in smaller communities and don't have the same profile as some of the bigger initiatives that we hear about a lot. So I've published a lot of these ideas and strategies in my report, The Right Fit, which you can see up on the PowerPoint. And you can download that entire report from the Multicultural New South Wales website if you're interested. And I came up with a bit of a framework around attracting and retaining newcomers, which I call Plan, Connect, Welcome and Stay. So you can dive into each of the stages of an attraction and retention strategy and start to get some ideas about what you may be able to implement here. But unfortunately today I can't go into all of the examples, so I've chosen 2 places around the world that I'm going to showcase to you. And I guess on reflection, I learnt so much and I heard so many different things while I was away, but the one common thread, and it will be of no surprise to everyone who's joining today, is the fact that without having a welcoming community, without having that place where people feel included and have a chance to meet others and develop those connections to the broader community, then the chances are that people, that's going to impact on people's decision to stay in a community. So it's a really basic principle, and ironically, I guess it took traveling to 5 countries around the world to really firm that up for me. But fundamentally, that welcoming community element is the foundation upon which everything else should follow. So in my presentation today, as I said, I'll take you to 2 different parts of the world. We'll go to Canada first and then to Norway. And I'm really hoping to highlight to you, firstly, the importance of involving the whole community in an attraction and retention strategy, and looking at finding the right fit between what newcomers, so people from migrant and refugee backgrounds, are looking for and what the regional community or the rural community has to offer. That fit is really important. The second thing I'm hoping to highlight is the need to build collaborative partnerships between all segments of the community for some careful planning, which is really important at all stages of any process. So I'd like to start, I've put together a bit of a video compilation. Everywhere I went, I filmed video interviews with people and asked them the same question. I asked them, well, 2 questions actually. What do they think are the key ingredients for a welcoming community? And what advice would they have for other towns around the world that are thinking about attracting and retaining newcomers? So I've put together this compilation, which I'll play for you now. And the video may kind of be a little bit skippy in some parts, but I'm hoping that the audio works pretty smoothly because we tested it out before and it seemed to be okay.
My advice is for these towns to promote a culture of acceptance, tolerance, and compassion. They just need to be aware that many of these immigrants and newcomers are not there to deplete resources or steal jobs. They are rather there to help the economy, contribute to the economy, the well-being of the people.
I think to succeed, I think it's very important that the society want them to come because we need them. not only to help, to be kind, but because we need them. And if we need them, it's much easier to have them included than if we don't need them.
People want the same things for their families. They want health and happiness. They want opportunity, and that health and happiness and opportunity doesn't come at the expense of someone else. We're not slicing the pie into more pieces. The pie grows by virtue of immigration, and particularly these refugees who, again, bring a depth of experience, compassion, empathy, and hard work.
I think you'll find it to be one of the more rewarding things you've ever done. It's it brings in a new way of looking at things, and we all have things that none of us know everything there is to know, so we can all learn from one another, and we'll all be the better for it.
We're just like them. We are going after our dreams and our ambitions, and we just want to live the best life possible, and that's what United States offer opportunities to really pursue your life and your dreams and your ambitions. And when people hear that perspective from us, they tend to really accept us, and that changed a lot of people's mind. It changed a lot of people's mind. People that never had opportunity to really talk to us and hear our story, and now hearing our story, for them, instead of them hearing from the media, which usually gives a bad negative perspective, negative narrative about us, now we're telling our own narrative.
What we have decided here is that we see all the newcomers as an asset. We need more people here in this area. The companies need more labor. So this is a good thing for us. This is not a burden or something. This is a resource for us. And when you decide that as a municipality, that helps you to go on and create a good system for those persons. So a system that really helps these persons to see themselves here in the long run. And then it comes to jobs and everything. So we have tried to create a system in cooperation with everyone here, so they can stay over time and continue to contribute to us.
Yeah, just I want to say to the community, to the people around the world, it's important to take care about each other, because we don't know why the people coming here. By now I have been in the hell, but now I'm in Sweden. I'm safe, and I have my life. I can, if the community helping the refugees to learning the language, and then they can find a job, so it will be successful for both the community, for everybody, for the refugees. So take care about each other.
I think Mom and I were camping, and this was around 1977, 78, and I had bought a copy of Raymond.
Okay. So the first place I'm going to take you to after that video compilation, which has hopefully kind of framed the messaging for today, that newcomers in many different places around the world have really proven themselves and been seen by the local community as a strength and an asset rather than a burden. And that was another common underlying thread everywhere I went to, where it seemed to be working really well. There was this real sense of viewing the asset and the strengths that people bring, rather than seeing people from refugee backgrounds as a burden on the community. So with that in mind, we'll go to Grey County, which is in Ontario in Canada. It's about 2.5 hours north of Toronto, and it's a pretty rural location. It's by the sea, as you can see. It's situated on a bay, and the regional centre there is a town called Owen Sound, which has a population of around 20,000 people. So they don't see a lot of immigration. There's about 8% of the population who come from immigrant backgrounds, and the majority of those people are from English-speaking countries such as the UK or the US. But back in 2015, at the height of the Syrian crisis, similar to many places around the world and the situation in Australia at the time, the community got together, and when the Canadian government had their policy, introduced their policy around allowing community groups to sponsor refugees, this became a bit of an avenue for the community to take action and decide to initiate their own sponsorship group and try and bring a refugee family to their town. So it was actually someone in the local church, a minister in the local church, who was driving this idea together with a few interested community members. And as a first step, they organised a meeting at the local church in around October of 2015 and got about 80 locals there. So people who were curious about the idea and had maybe a few concerns, but wanted to find out more about what it would mean for their town. Out of this meeting, then a small number of the church members put up their hand to formally form a community sponsorship group. And they ended up bringing out the first refugee family of 7 people from Eritrea, I think in 2016. So it was the first refugee family to arrive in the region, and it was quite a new thing for the people of Grey County. And there were a lot of local community members sitting on the sidelines thinking whether this would be the right thing for their town and for their region, and maybe a little bit hesitant and reluctant as to not knowing what it would involve. But as the family settled in and they got to know a lot of people right across the region, and they were really well liked, a lot of those locals that were sitting on the fence then suddenly became interested themselves about wanting to get involved. And a number of other sponsorship groups started to form both in Owen Sound and in some of the smaller towns around Grey County. So the church decided to organise monthly meetings because they received so much interest from the broader community. And they opened up these meetings to the whole community, and that eventually turned into what they called the Grey Bruce Newcomer Network, which helped to support other sponsorship groups to quickly form so that they could sponsor more families into the region. And by the time I was there last year, I think it was around 25 families in total that had arrived through sponsorship. And even more families had actually moved to the region because they'd heard from families that had settled there that it was a welcoming place, and they moved to join them. So it had become quite a thriving place, you could say. One of the projects in Grey County that they initiated that was really critical in supporting the newly arrived refugees was called Making Grey Bruce Home. So a big challenge for these initial sponsorship groups and for the new refugees themselves in Grey County was the fact that there was no established settlement service in the region. So from very early on, many of the sponsorship groups felt like they'd just been left on their own and had to try and navigate themselves through how to support people and how to ensure that that they had the services in place to help people once they arrived. The newcomer network that had formed was a really important way that allowed these sponsorship groups to come together and connect with one another, and this helped them to share strategies and challenges with each other. But it also continued to highlight this gap in terms of having professional supports and services available to the refugees. So a local NGO, the United Way of Bruce Grey, got together with a newcomer network, and they decided to initiate this project, which aimed to create a model that would build the capacity of the existing services in the region to work with newcomers and to be able to include the refugees amongst their clients. The project was really focused on what one of the people I interviewed called a decentralized model of settlement service provision. So their aim was to enable and activate the existing services in the region to be able to deliver settlement support rather than having and establishing one centralized settlement organisation, which they didn't have the resources to do anyway. So through the project, the team went out and provided cultural humility training and workshops for a number of services across the region. And they helped to support collaborations between the service providers to avoid duplication and to create complementary programs and services that could be accessed at more of a regional level rather than just one town. So one of the challenges they faced in Grey County was the fact that I think it's 8 or 9 smaller centres were spread right across the region, and there was a real lack of public transport as well. So it meant that many people were disconnected from support services that might be available in one town when they were living in another. So they tried to look at these gaps, and this led to some really innovative solutions, like they established an outreach service with an existing library bus that used to travel, or that does travel, between the towns across the region. They then had an outreach service that was made available for people within that library bus that helped to visit them in the hometowns that they were living within. The project also included a number of smaller initiatives. So they started up a mentoring network that matched trained volunteers with newcomers. They established a centralised web portal which listed all of the available services and supports across the region. It gave up-to-date information, it celebrated and showcased different innovations across the region. So that web portal was not only useful for the refugees themselves, but also for sponsorship groups, for the service providers and for the volunteers to be able to access. And they put together a toolkit for service providers and volunteers, which you can see images of on the screen there, to help build their capacity and be used as a training resource into the future. And this toolkit has also been shared now right across Canada with other towns who've been interested in initiating similar approaches. While the community focused on this, building this sense of welcome and inclusion amongst services and community infrastructure, the county government really focused on engaging with the employers. So they hired an outreach coordinator whose main role was to engage the employers, understand what kind of skill sets they were looking for, and get a really clear sense of where the workforce demands were and help to meet these through matching the skill sets of the refugees that had come in. But it also led to another really interesting project, which was a collaboration with an organisation, a settlement service based in Outer Toronto, through an initiative called the Rural Employment Initiative. And the organisation in Toronto was engaging with a number of migrants and refugees that had initially come there, had had trouble finding a job, were interested to relocate through secondary migration. And so they then helped, I guess, on the potential source community and match the jobs that the coordinator in Grey County was finding within the potential receiving community. And so you got this really nice complement between, and a bit of a pipeline between employment opportunities and people who might be interested to relocate through secondary migration. And that helped the county be a bit more strategic with meeting the specific need for skilled workers in the region. The settlement organisation also went out and held a number of workshops and training for employers around diversity and cultural awareness. And the county coordinator used a number of interesting ideas to engage with the employers and promote the opportunity. A couple of things that worked really well that she shared with me were holding employer breakfasts, and that gave the opportunity for business owners to come together and share their strategies and experiences, but also talk through some of the challenges they may be having in the workplace around addressing cultural differences or other recruitment practices. But it also gave a chance for newcomers and refugees to talk about their experiences working in the workplace and provide a platform to highlight the opportunities to employ more people from refugee and migrant backgrounds. They also have held a number of regional job fairs, which has been great with the organisation based in Toronto, because they can bring a busload of people to attend the job fair and facilitate those direct connections with the employers at that event. So one of the strengths of Grey County's approach is the fact that they got the whole community involved with supporting newcomers. What started out as a small number of people of goodwill, you could say, from the church, expanded into a broader community network and then reached out to the business sector and involved local services. Their approach was really focused on inclusion. They recognised from early on that they didn't have everything in place in terms of formal settlement support services, but instead tried to look at how they could work within the existing service system through an inclusion lens and make sure that it's accessible to migrants and refugees. Excuse me. One of the challenges they've faced is around some of the groups, the refugee family groups that have been sponsored, and the fact that for some people, living in a rural location is where there's no public transport and where there's not potentially the employment opportunities that they were looking for that matched their work experience and skill set, meant that there were a number of families who decided after the period of their sponsorship to move on. And this became quite upsetting for the community, who had invested a lot of time in supporting the families and felt that really strong connection. And there was a sense of loss and grief when those families decided maybe to move to other parts of Canada. So there were expectations within the sponsorship groups, I think, that needed to be managed from early on, and really respecting people's independence and autonomy around their decisions around where they'd like to live. However, there were many families who felt absolutely like they'd hit the jackpot when they landed in Grey County, and felt that sense of welcome and felt that sense of being able to form these really great connections and relationships with people. And for some of those families, they were willing to overlook the fact that they couldn't get a job in their preferred industry, or it might take a little bit longer to get your driver's license, for that deep sense of connection to community that they had. These issues were obviously a lot easier to overcome when it came to secondary migrants, because there it was more closely about managing those expectations of the migrants and what jobs and services were available before they made that decision to relocate. Okay, so now we're going to go to the other side of the globe, to Norland County in Norway, and it's right up north of the Arctic Circle. It's a beautiful part of the world. It's made up of 44 different municipalities, and most of the municipalities have really small populations in the hundreds. And the region is best known for its fishing industry. They farm about 11% of our global cod consumption, and they export cod all around the world. They also have a growing tourism industry in the summer months. But the big problem there is the fact that it is so remote, and the fact that a lot of the jobs that are available are in the lower or semi-skilled category. So it's meant they've had difficulty finding workers locally to do the jobs that continue to prop up the economy through the fishing industry. So they've become overly reliant on fly-in, fly-out seasonal workers that are mostly coming from Eastern Europe to fill the shortages. I was really interested to go there to learn about a project, a multi-sectoral project that had been initiated by the county government, which is equivalent to the state and territory government here, called the In-Migration Project. And they set back in 2013 a pretty ambitious target to try and attract 10,000 new residents to the region over a 5-year period. I'm now going to play you a short compilation of some of the local voices from Norland County, and they can introduce the project to you themselves.
My name is Zdenek Dvorak, and right now we are in Bodø in northern Norway, in county or region called Norland, and I work at the Norland County Council at the international office with international cooperation. And I could maybe also add that we are above Arctic Circle, so even though it's May, it's still cold and a lot of snow around. About Norland as a region, I could maybe just mention that we are, the size is 40,000 square kilometers, and we are only 240,000 inhabitants. We have few bigger towns and many small municipalities which have only 500 or maybe 1,000 people, so it's quite many small communities, and many of those communities are struggling with that the population is getting older, that many young people are moving out, and it happens especially when they are going to get higher education, so that's a really big problem. On the other side, the economy goes really well and we need a workforce, and that's also, for example, the reason why we had this project on how to work with the people who already are here and how can we motivate to stay longer, do better jobs, how they can participate in the society and become a part of the Norland, let's say.
A key ingredient for a welcoming community, I believe, is that you have a system in place. You have talked it through. There's an awareness in the community on all levels, from the authorities, local authorities, to within the population. And you also need to support people, fire cells as we call it in Norwegian, who really wants to make a difference. The volunteer sector, you need to use the resources that are already there and see if there is a need to establish new projects or new systems, because throughout history we receive different kinds of people with different kinds of needs perhaps, but also with different kinds of resources that we can use. So I think you need to have a positive perspective on being a community that welcomes people and see it in the perspective of the resources that they bring with them, but not to take away the real issues and concerns that some people also might have, but be serious about that as well and talk about it, and perhaps through knowledge that you can take away some of the fear and establish a good communication based on facts, I think.
I make sure that you have an organization who take care of people, so they are not left alone when they're coming. If you see them and take care of them, and they have the basal use, they need a house. In the first time they probably want to rent a house, but if you can get them to buy their own house after a while, I think you will get them to settle down.
I think that there are at least two ingredients. The first one is that the people or the community must be open and must actually want to get some new members from different reasons. And the second one is that these people in this community should feel safe with the situation they already are in, so that they wouldn't be afraid of, you know, getting new people in their community. So to be open and to feel safe are the main ingredients in my point of view.
So what they did in Norland, when the county government started the pilot, they went out to the municipalities, and 7 councils came back and said, we're interested to be involved with this attraction project. So they created this network of the participating municipalities, which helped some of the bigger local government areas get together with the smaller local government areas for whom migration was a really new and kind of daunting task, and they didn't necessarily have the resources locally to be able to drive their own planning and coordinated approach. So this network became a way for municipalities to share ideas and practices, but also to look at leveraging resources and opportunities at a regional level. So where there were particular issues around housing shortages in one municipality, in a neighbouring one there may have been housing availability, and so they could then broker those solutions for people in that coordinated way. Another really interesting thing that this enabled was each municipality to go away through their own funding and come up with their own understanding of what the needs were locally. And you saw some really creative outcomes come as a result of that. So one in particular, Flakstad, which is a really tiny municipality. You saw Erling speak on the video from Flakstad. They decided to interview all of the seasonal workers who had been flying in and out of their town for years and understand from them what would be the key factors that would make them stay in the community long term. And the two things that they heard from the workers were that they would be interested to stay if they could get year-round employment, that only 3 or 4 months of the year working is obviously not enough to sustain themselves and their families. So that led the council to bring together employers from the tourism and fishing industries and start to map out those year-round jobs. But also they said, we're really concerned about our spouses and children. So we'd want to make sure that there's employment for our spouse, and we want to make sure that our children, if we were to pick them up and move them here, felt like they were part of this community. So the municipalities started really focusing on activities around social participation and creating opportunities for newcomers to meet with locals. Yeah, I think the strength in this approach was this whole of community approach that brought together government at different levels with the business sector, with community, to really look at those place-based solutions at a local level, and then that helicopter view of the regional level. And ultimately, unfortunately, they didn't meet their 10,000 mark, but they did manage to slow down the decline of the community. And by the end of the project in 2018, they'd added around 7,000 additional long-term immigrants to the region. So they were pretty happy with that outcome. So to wrap up, there's no quick and easy solution to regional population issues and welcoming and supporting refugees. But my number one learning, I guess, from the research is that it requires that whole of community approach. It requires careful consideration and planning from all levels of government, community and business working together to make it work. And that information is key. The more that the whole community can be involved, understand what it's about, have the opportunity to unpack fears and concerns, the more chance there is that there'll be a broader acceptance of migration, of newcomers, of refugees, and this leads to generally a more welcoming community. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time today. My email address is there. There's a link to my website if you'd like to see some more stories and videos. And yeah, please download my report if you're interested to read any more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Talia. And I can't encourage you all enough to jump on Talia's website and look at the report. It's fascinating. And so we go from Talia's incredible insight and research to our own community. And I want to kick off by introducing Yusuf. Yusuf arrived here in December 2018, on the 24th of December. So it was truly a bit of a Christmas gift for the Springwood community. And I want Yusuf, so we're kind of running for time. So we have like 4 minutes and hopefully we can pack it there. But I would like if you could share, what did that welcome look like from the moment you set foot in Australia, out of the plane, together with your daughter, Angelina, who, may I add, is a student in a local school in our community?
Yeah, first thing, hi, and thanks for hosting me. So it was like a great change in my life when I first lived in in Australia. And I surprised by Mark and Maren waiting for me at the airport, and they welcomed me and they took me to their home because they are the family who sponsor us, and they treat us like as a member of the family. We didn't even feel we are a stranger or something like that. And directly the next day, my daughter Angelina, she started naming them Granny and Granddad, and she joined playing with the kids, and everything looks good. And I spent like 10 days in their home. After that, I moved to my unit, and I find out that a member of the church, they cleaned my unit, and by cooperating with the SSI, they put all the furniture that I need, and everything was ready for me. And I feel welcome from the community too. When I met Susan Templeman by accident in a market, and she welcomed me, and that was great to meet a member of the parliament, and how humble she was to walk between the people. We can't have something like that in our country. You know, it's very, very different things. Yeah, and I get supported from the community, from my church members, and they are very nice people, and they have a really good heart. They try to help and assist all the time.
So Yusuf, can you share, you shared this with me before, but could you share what type of assistance, for example, they provided you when you needed to study at TAFE? What would they do to support you?
Yeah, when I joined TAFE, I met new friends, and the first year it was really difficult for me to understand things, because the teachers were talking too fast, and I cannot really get things. So my friend, they was helping me all the time, through the assessments and explaining things to me, and they was really telling the teachers we should be more easy with him, because he cannot get things quickly. But this was at Cert 3, but on Cert 4 I was really good. There is many things change, and I was getting everything quickly. And yeah, the teachers love me, and my friends there, they love me too, and they support me all the time.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Yusuf. It does say to me, at least my takeout is that they were crucial people that really connected you with the community and walked alongside you. But can I, just to finish off, ask you, Yusuf, if you were talking about your Springwood community to a friend, what 3 things would you say that described why Springwood is your home?
You know, the good people, the the nice treatment, the compassion that they have, and they always offering to assist you, and in the nature of the city, and the most important things I could feel I'm a human and have my rights. In my countries, my rights, it was my dreams, but now I got my rights and just dreaming for my new dreams.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. And I feel like we should talk about these 3 hours with all the community with us, but we're very short for time. Thank you so much. I want to remind everyone to pop in your questions if you have any. At the time, we can at the end we can come and potentially get to ask them on your behalf. Thank you, Yusuf. I'm now gonna call on Kathy Clark, who is the principal at North Katoomba Primary School, and who has had quite a bit of experience supporting the children from the Tibetan community. Kathy, could you share with us how has hosting and supporting the Tibetan children in your school changed the shape of your school? And how has that impacted the community?
Sure, Marcella, I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, because I've lost the whole screen, which normally happens, doesn't it? Can I first also acknowledge that Katoomba North Public School also meet on Darug and Gundungurra land, and I pay my respects to any Aboriginals who are listening here today, any elders past and present. I guess, first off, the benefits is that as a whole school community, we value the contribution that our families have made, not only to us, into our classrooms and the school community. And we do this through the value, I guess, of acknowledging their culture and wisdom and the level of diversity they offer our school. Even though we're in the Upper Blue Mountains, we have a very diverse family background. We have 18% of our families who identify as coming from a first language other than English. And then a further 21% of our students are Aboriginal, identify as being Aboriginal. So clearly we have a very wide, rich culture of diverse backgrounds. And as a school community, we also know that that strengthens our wider community, not just the school. By having, I guess, students from such a diverse background, we know that it provides all our students with an understanding of cultures, traditions that perhaps they aren't really aware of. And for us, this just leads into a natural acceptance of differences between people. And when I say differences, I don't mean differences, but actually that people come from a varied culture or a different background. And, you know, that I guess is just a flow on in so many good ways into the school. In the classrooms, our students are enriched when students generally share their culture, and they do that through literacy, or they might do it through geography or history or games or sport. They're seen as part of the Katoomba North community. Our community is a very accepting community, whether people are here for a short time or they call it home. And I guess just to emphasise that, we've had a Tibetan community in our school who still have ties with us through the outer or the bigger Tibetan community. And every time they come into the school, they say that they're visiting family and they feel like the school's a second home to them. So for us, I guess that just lets us know that what we're doing, you know, is the right thing. I thought about what we actually do as a school also. And in hindsight, I don't really think it's what we do, it's how we do, because a lot of schools do what you would for any student. But we have a very open door policy, and no one who comes to our school has ever been turned away for whatever reason. We always do the practical, you know, it's either uniform support or equipment support. We welcome the whole family. Students are buddied up with other students. We make sure that we provide a safe, nurturing environment for new students. Because we're a small school, every teacher knows every student in our school. So when we have a new student from another culture, teachers make sure that they know that student by name within the first couple of days. We strive for equality, no matter what resources we have. If there's concerns, we look at culture first, making sure that we're aware of culture and backgrounds. And also, we also appreciate that some people come to our school community and they've suffered huge trauma, and we need to also be really mindful that a situation might be caused with trauma. So because of that, we work out a plan and then provide support to the students and the family. We opened up our school to the Tibetan community here, and they use our school premises for their Saturday language classes. And for the past few years, the Tibetan community have used our school hall for all their cultural celebrations, whether it's for the Dalai Lama's birthday or Tibetan New Year or whatever. And as I say, I think it's not what we do, it's how we do it. And for us, we actually see our school that there really aren't any issues that we can't find a solution for. To be honest, we just have to be creative and make sure that whoever comes to our school is welcomed and they know that they're accepted, they're valued, and they're part of the school community from day one. They don't have to prove themselves to us. They're just part of the Katoomba North Public School community.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I was actually going to ask you a little bit of a follow-up, which was what would you advise to other principals listening today? But I think you've just summed it all up. And I love you finishing really about it's not what we do, but how we do it, because it is really about adapting to the best of our knowledge and understanding of cultural diversity. So thank you so much, Kathy.
You're
and
very
I'm so
welcome.
sad we're so pressed for time, but now I'm going to have to pass on to Kathy Clark. Sorry, Kathy Atkinson. Thank you so much, Kathy. Kathy Atkinson is the manager and owner of Little Nishnash Cafe in Lura, and is coming here from her experience of employing people from a refugee background, and is freezing somewhere there in Lura, I think. So, Kathy, would you? We've got 4 minutes, so it's really little, but I'd love for you to share in 4 minutes. Maybe start with who you called Rami, who I know you employed on the spot as she walked into your cafe, and I'd love for you to walk us through what that looks like and the experience you've had so far.
Okay, so Ramzaya, we call her Rami, came into the shop. She was 20 when she walked in, and I knew very little of her circumstances, and over time I've learnt where she came from, what she had to deal with, and why she ended up in Australia, and it's been an incredibly humbling experience to deal with a young woman like Rami when she has had to deal with what she's dealt with, and in that process I have seen issues come up for her, talking to her, that involve her language development, her comprehension of our language, her reading skills, the fact that she is constantly dealing with the loss of family because she's here on her own. She's a 21-year-old woman in Australia, and her actual family is not in this country. She's dealing with really serious, I believe anyway, PTSD that is a silent presence in her and around her constantly, and you know, it's a very big issue for her to deal with, and it's hard. It's hard for me too, because I'm not trained in dealing with that, but I care for her, so I'm aware of it. She's also become bored because she's an incredibly intelligent person who has things closed off to her because of the things that I just mentioned to you, you know, in relation to education and the emotional issues that she's dealing with. And, you know, I want to move her through employment and give her an apprenticeship, get her into chefing. But again, it's those top issues that I mentioned that will colour and affect how she moves through the process. Given that she is a person who only went to school till she was 7 or 8 years old. So she's just an amazing person.
And Kathy, tell us about, sorry to interrupt. I was wondering if you can tell us about, because that sets an amazing context for who she is and how she comes to you. Can you tell us about how she is as a worker? What have been your experience?
Because she came in and she didn't know a lot about cooking, but it's like I've watched this flower blossom, and she's competent, she's quick, she anticipates things that, you know, other people don't. You know, she's great at planning. She's supportive with me in like the other day I haven't been well, and it was like, well, as I'm leaving, because I wasn't well, she's like, well, can I make the soup for you? You know, like I've never heard anyone say that to me before. It was like she is just this amazing giving person, and that blows me away, because she's come from this dreadful situation where, you know, a lot of people wouldn't be as giving and as flexible and as curious as she is. And I just want to see her confidence, you know, really build, so that she can move through this society and stand on her own 2 feet, and, you know, be the person that she truly is. And with this group of people that we are today, if we can sort of provide the other side of things, this is the nuts and bolts of employment and moving into a community. But I really believe that people from this sort of background also need to get opportunities to meet people their own age in a social setting, and, you know, celebrate birthdays with people like us. You know, let's do birthdays and Christmas and sort of try and not only get the work thing happening, but also the family thing happening, because, you know, someone like Rami has no family out here per se.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you for everything you're doing.
I love it.
That is unfortunately all we have time for. I feel like, in a sense, it's good, because I hope you are all feeling like me, like we need to know a little bit more. Can I ask you all to put yourselves on camera again if you feel comfortable? I want to remind you that we're recording. We don't have time for questions anymore. I'm really sorry, but I want to invite Mary to close us off with a little bit of a call for action, hopefully, because the aim of today was to hopefully find a sense of what is our place in this community, the community that the world is, but particularly our Blue Mountains community, to make sure that we are a place of true welcome. Mary.
Thank you, Marcella. And thank you, Talia, Kathy, Yusuf, Kathy, and all of you for being involved. And especially for all of you who've put your name in the chat in our call to action, because that's what this is all about, the start of thing, or not the start, because in fact we've done great work here in the Blue Mountains over many years. But let's get together and have a strategic approach about how we can make this even better. Thank you to those people who have joined from regional communities all over Australia. We're very happily sisters and brothers to other rural Australians for refugee groups, and it's great that you're connected into this and can take this information back to your communities as well. And I know Talia will be presenting more and more on the work that she's done, and she's got just excellent resources on her website. We only got a sample of that today, and that is really magnificent. So I'm going to ask everyone to take yourself off mute and give ourselves a clap, give Talia and our speakers a clap, and we're, because we also have a commitment to finishing on time, but please email me or one of the other organisers if you'd like to continue to be involved in this. And we'll be sending out, we recorded this and we'll be sending out the recording, and you can send it out to other people as well. And thank you, Mary. Yes, you can put a reaction on your square as well. Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
And we're going to close off the meeting, but the organisers will rejoin on the same Zoom so that we can just have a debrief.
Okay. Well done, Marcella and Mary.